Oh, I didn't. I'm in the private chat. That's why.
You're in the private chat. Okay, I think we are live.
Hey, hey, there we are.
Yeah, there. You see me?
I see you. Yep.
Okay, here we are, JR, and not legal advice or myself. I like talking about myself in the ninth person. You know, some people talk about themselves in the third person. Not enough. That's way too modest for me. And
Right.
even though I'm more modest than anybody else that I know, uh, that's where it stops. So how are you?
You are modest. I'm
Yeah,
good. I'm
good.
good. Just
Great to have
you know,
you around. Great to have you around. Hopefully, we're going to do this on a regular basis in the future. I'm going to hold my comment for a little while about what we just spoke about. That I'll bring it up a little later. Um, not legal advice. Obviously, this is not legal advice. I have to say this, like, very particularly, unfortunately. It's not like I haven't said this like a billion times, but this is really not legal advice. And anything we say, do not rely upon anything we say. And I mean that, by the way, honestly. And I mean it from a consumer standpoint also. If you're a consumer and somebody says something, just don't take it at face value. Just don't. You don't. It doesn't mean you have to be doesn't mean you have to be a psycho about it, but listen, everybody sees things differently, and you should not just rely upon anybody. You should rely upon yourself after you kind of figure it out. And that's why I say that, and I really mean it. Hopefully, something we say here will be of use to somebody in some situation. It may not be some situation that we even anticipate, by the way. It might have nothing to do with law. It might be just they need a bad pun, and they got access to it that way. Whatever. But I
they're
really
all
do
bad
mean,
puns.
yeah, they are. Yes, they are. If they're not bad, then they're not. They don't do the deal.
Exactly.
Anyway, it's nice to have you back. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. But again, do your own research. Don't rely upon it. And this is just for fun and entertainment purposes only. Because it's probably, just so you know, there's probably, as it goes, there's probably others that are watching this besides just all us interested people in whatever we're interested in. But there's probably others that have alternative reasons for watching, because I've been told that. And I've seen quotations from some purported quotations from some videos. So hello to you too. And again, to anybody out there who's watching, please like and subscribe if you haven't. Even if you're a bad guy compared to me, please do that. We would like you to be on board.
So these mysterious people that are watching, are these the attorneys that are,
Yeah. Well,
in
I don't
some
know
of
if
the
they're.
cases,
I
the
don't know if they're.
opposition attorneys?
I don't know if they're the attorneys or they're like some company working for the attorneys, or if it's somebody working for the attorneys. I don't know. But I do know that since they cite language, they have to, and they cite the videos, that means somebody must have some semblance of, maybe there's a program where they could look for certain language. Because what's interesting is in the First Amendment complaint, so you can file multiple complaints under certain circumstances. So somebody could file a lawsuit, and then they
Right.
might file an amended lawsuit. So we're on the First Amendment complaint. There's a lot of stuff. I was going to get to it later anyway, but there's just a lot of interesting allegations. But the allegations relate to having watched certain videos and apparently certain language from the videos. It's funny though when somebody says something, but they don't quote it.
Right.
So it makes me, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I just think it's amusing that there's somebody going to be paid to watch this.
I know,
Which,
on a Sunday.
which
I don't know if they're
if
watching
they
on a
knew
Sunday.
how little a time we actually put into this, and I mean, it's mind-boggling, I guess.
We
But anyway.
did have a consultation today before the show. You have to acknowledge that, right?
Yeah, well, it's our typical 5-second consultation before you say, "Hey, we're going live in 60 seconds."
Yeah, that was about it.
So,
that was about
I
it.
had
But
someone ask me today what we were talking about. I said, I have no idea.
yeah. And that's sometimes that's good. We kind of decided sometimes it's better if JR doesn't know and we kind of react off the top of his head. Um, and so, but anyway, so that's kind of where we are, and we'll get back to GTII because some people I know have some interest in GTII. I don't know why in particular, but the attorneys who represent GTII, they have an interest in this video. So treat them nicely and welcome them in. And again, if you haven't subscribed, please like and subscribe, especially if you're on the opposing side. I'd appreciate that. At least give me that, if nothing else.
Yeah, for fuck's sake, at least like the guy.
At least like and subscribe. I mean, if you're gonna be along for the ride. Right. Now, before we start, although I guess we started already, a couple things I have to get off my my chest here. You know, I couldn't even read my own writing is the problem. Families are like Rocky Road ice cream, mostly sweet with a few nuts. You can identify with that, I'm sure. What do you call a cowboy who rides a bike? A psychopath.
Come on, two more. Let's go. Chop, chop.
Did you hear that oxygen and magnesium got together? OMG. Oxygen and magnesium. Okay. And last but not least, why did the cowboy adopt a dachshund? That's a dog, by the way. Someone told him to get a long little doggy.
Got it.
Got it?
Got it now? Those were not your best, man. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I take that as a compliment. Yeah. Have you been paying attention to the election? There's an election going on. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of it. I've heard there's something going on.
Have you? Do you have an opinion on just in general?
On the candidates?
Well, no, or the campaign, the election. Doesn't have to be anything.
Well, I this notion that it wasn't a free and fair election on the Democratic side. I think that's just smoke and mirrors bullshit. I mean, look, the party can do what the party wants to do. Yeah, they hold primaries, but at the end of the day, the party's going to do what the party wants to do. So, this notion that somehow they took Camilla and thrust her into the limelight, out of Biden, and all this secret bullshit that's going on behind the scenes, it is what it is. People need to deal with it. The Democrats need to deal with it. And I say that because I am a registered Democrat. But this whole notion that party politics, I mean, look, party politics have always been there. They've been there since the Reagan days. They were there with Bush 1. They were there with Bush 2. They've always been there. And it's no different than on the Democrat side. So people need to get over that. At least the Democrats need to get over that. And Republicans need to stop pointing their fingers saying blah, 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 blah. You sideswipe the primary election. Because the Republicans would do the same thing if the shoe was on the other foot. So, I can't stand when they finger point at shit that they would do themselves. So that's really my first take. My second take is like anything, here we are with, we got Trump again, and I'm okay with that because I'm about 98% certain I'm voting for Trump. But once again, we've got a recycled candidate on the Republican side, and on the Democrat side, we've got someone with no real leadership qualities, nothing that is inspiration. I've not seen anything inspirational out of Camilla. So it's kind of the standard U.S. election. We throw in the person that's got the best chance of winning, regardless of not only their personality but their political skills. I tend to think that if Trump gets elected, he's going to have a hard time getting things done because he does have so much dissension within the party. I think that he's going to be putting targets on certain people's backs in Congress for speaking out against him or not voting party lines. And the Democrats just can't get their shit together. And they can't get their shit together because they've got poor leadership. They have Nancy Pelosi is as old as time. She's out of touch. She shouldn't be there. Schumer's the same way. I mean, the generation that's up and coming, they want change. They want real change. They don't care that you've been in Congress for 30 years and because you've got all this seniority that you need to be a leader. These people want leaders. We're craving real leadership. Whether you're a millennial or a Gen X, we're tired of, and I hate to say it, but we're tired of old white people running the show in Congress. And I'm not pointing out whites in general, but if you look across the board, that's what we're stuck with. We're stuck with an older generation of white folks that weren't raised the way that we've been raised, are out of touch with technology, have no idea what the fuck they're doing. And that's what I think we're all tired of. And here we are again, gearing up for a campaign for an election, and we've got the same Rice Krispies that we've had all the time. So that's my feeling on
it. Okay. First of all, does that relate in any way to GTII?
You asked me about the election.
I'm just asking a question. That's all. I'm just asking a question.
Oh, yeah, it does, because GTII suffers from the same problem, a lack of leadership, a lack of people that are doing things. And you and I talked about that many moons ago. The corporate board there has been asleep at the wheel for how long? They've got no revenue. They've got no contracts coming in. They've got no business deals on the table. I mean, you can say what you want about David Reichman, but he's not done his job.
And it's not even tradable, right?
Exactly.
How about
it's on the expert market.
Is that a good job? If you're on management, I mean, this question. I don't know. This is just, I'm throwing out a question. Question is, if your management and your company gets downlisted a second time so it's not tradable, is that good?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I mean, here's the other thing.
I didn't know.
There's been no action for 2 years now. There's been no action. They've done
nothing.
There
might have been. There's no revenue. No revenue. There may have been action, but no revenue.
Well, the action is proof in doing, proof in concept. What's been presented to shareholders as a positive that they've done? Nothing. And any fucktard attorney that's watching this and being paid to watch that, you make sure you put that in your brief. What is the board doing to generate revenue? What kind of deals do they have in the pipeline? You put that in your response brief. I'd like to see it.
Oh, okay. Maybe you will. Maybe they'll quote you.
I'm on fire tonight.
I hope they quote you. I do. I hope that.
That was fucktard with a capital F.
Yeah. I think that, I'm sorry we keep on going there, but I think the reason why they responded to me the way they did, because they were trying to shut down that dissent. And if you were, it's the irony is, just think about it. If you're on their side, you're claiming this guy, me, is making up a bunch of stuff. And then after you claim that, they get downlisted again. Oh no. If I'm on that side and I had just thrown out a bunch of nonsense, these guys are great. Oops, we got downlisted again. Uh-oh.
You know what? They're spending more time going after you than they are doing their damn job. And that's sad.
I take that as a compliment.
I mean, what are the legal fees they're paying for people to watch these YouTubes to scour them for something you say so that they can put it?
I don't listen. I'm sure some shareholder probably go after the current board for breach of fiduciary duty and wasting money.
Yeah, that's a complete waste of money. Yeah. The amount of, if they put 1% of the amount of time in that they put into suing you, they might be generating revenue.
Probably not.
So,
probably not. I think they would have generated revenue. But
here's the thing. Here's the thing. Any attorney that's telling them they have a case against you is full of fucking shit. And they're doing it nothing more than to make a quick buck. They probably charging an outrageous hourly rate. And look, let's be honest. These are fucking quack attorneys. These are not educated attorneys. These are not analytical people. These are not people that were writing law reviews in law school. These are probably guys that got C+ or C- and D+ and barely scraped by some of the basic courses in law school.
I'm going to take a different position. I have to defend the attorneys on the other side. I don't know if that's the case. I just think, no, but I think they may have, listen, if they have a client says, go after this because I want you to go after it. I want you to make a point.
Yeah.
Listen, sometimes it happens. And then sometimes maybe your client doesn't give you all the information for whatever reason. One, because they're a moron, or two, because they don't want to disclose the all information, or three, because some other reason, whatever. That
Right.
happens too. So sometimes the attorney's kind of in the dark. We happen to have a meet confer tomorrow. So that what happens is, what happens is in my action, I have not yet responded. GTII. We're talking about the GTII matter. They sued me for defamation and trade libel. Defamation of David Reichman and then Luke Rabari, and trade libel of GTII because I've damaged their business, I guess.
How did you
The
do
claim,
that?
I have no idea. And since they got delisted after I said it, and then the price dropped in the toilet, I think it's kind of a tough case, even if everything they said was true. Even if it's like
Right.
I say today, yes, I'm responsible, you win. So you get minus $95,000. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Look,
I don't really understand. I don't really understand the damages if you let it kind of go out of business, and it's because you don't file a document. And I don't think that, by the way, that's not disputed. They're non-compliant. Because they were non-compliant, they got dropped down to
yeah.
the below market, and we really don't have access to that.
It's laughable that's what they're those are their alleged allegations. I mean, this is a board that has been sitting on their behind for the last 2 years. I'm going to say it again. They've not produced any deals. They used shoddy auditors. We know that. That's all public information. What have they been doing? What
Yeah,
have they
the
been doing?
auditor thing, I like to get back that because again, we got started MMTLP, so now we're going to jump around a little bit. We got started MMTLP. When we went through MMTLP, we saw how bad the regulators were, the brokers, everybody. When I was like watching, this is by the way, and partly in my declaration. So I have a declaration I have to prepare in part for the motions I will be filing related to my action. So I was talking about MMTLP in the declaration because that's how I got interested in GTII. The
Right.
reason why I got interested in MMTLP because we being JR and I, you look around and you see everybody involved was deficient. Everybody. And it was
Well,
and nothing got done. Everybody, I mean, like the regulators, the brokers, the
yeah,
hedge funds.
I agree with that, but I think let's give ourselves a little credit. I mean, the reason you and I got involved was because of the desperation that we heard on those space calls in the very early days, the December and January. And I distinctly remember when you and I first connected on the phone and we talked about the people, and you and I shared stories of people that we had talked to. And, we both agreed that we need to, educate and try and, kind of bring people back from the cliff. And I think that was our biggest strength was we were a voice of reason in a time where people had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
And we didn't either. We knew there was foul play. We couldn't articulate it at that point. And now obviously two and a half years later, we have a much clearer picture of what happened.
Yeah, I'm going to respond to that, and then I was going to say to Hawkeye, Rule 11 is discussed in my declaration in my motion. So yes, I'm on
Yeah,
the
I
same
saw that.
page. Rule 11 is a federal rule, means that if you file a lawsuit that's frivolous, or when you sign a pleading, you're verifying the accuracy of the pleading. So, for example, if you claim, which they do in mine, that everything is true and correct, but it's not, and theoretically, that's a violation. It's a Rule 11 violation because you've said something that's not true. And I'm going to just focus. I was going to, at one point in time, I was just going to focus on one element of my complaint, just to give you an example why I think it's a Rule 11 issue. But getting back to your point is, yeah, absolutely. When you and I first spoke, we had no intention of getting involved. Really, we didn't. We were
No.
just trying to make money like everybody else. And you were much more involved. You were much more personable with the community. They trusted you, whatever. So you were heavily in. I just heard in the background what was going on. I listened to some of those early space calls, and it was like tragic. And it was, again, most people could do nothing, and it's not like I did anything anyway, but I at least made an attempt to get involved and represent the interest of the community. Certainly not my own financial interest, as JR knows. But you and I both felt compelled by the group,
We
and
did.
just it makes my stomach turn when I think about it. I go to a place, I physically go to a place. It's terrible. The number of people that got impacted, because finance ultimately impacts your health and your well-being,
Right.
etc. There were a bunch of people that I believe passed away, or relatives of people, and just the amount of stress. It really was devastating to so many people that you couldn't help, if you could, to get involved. And there's not a lot of, like, you and I, so we got involved and we did whatever we could do. You were very active, I know, in like the DC part of it. I was kind of doing my own thing, but seeing what I could kind of do on my own. But there were plenty of people, community members, that did their stuff. So it was great. But there weren't
Yeah.
a
I mean,
ton, but
I,
there weren't a ton of professionals that
no,
offered their services, unfortunately.
no, for me, I think the big thing for me was I knew I was capable of helping. I knew I was capable of being, a reasonable voice. And I tend to be an empath to my detriment sometimes. I've always had this ability to put myself in other people's shoes and feel and understand what they're going through, which is, you know, it was good and bad. I was on the phone a lot with people. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but I think it was February, maybe late February after the halt. I had an individual reach out to me, and I ended up being on the phone with him for almost 2 hours in Lowe's parking lot. And that conversation stuck with me. I talked to a couple of other individuals who were going through health situations, and were banking on selling. Whenever I tend to ignore what people's numbers were, but
You're referring
people
now,
that
again, just for everybody's listening, you're referring to MMTLP,
yeah,
correct?
we're talking about MMTLP, and people were going through health issues, or I talked to one individual that was banking on that money to go to an adoption agency and pay for an adoption. Uh, so my heart just led for some of these folks, and that's really why I geared up. And then I got involved with a couple of people that were attached to DC, and I got sucked into that. And I was constantly doing Zoom calls and educating, and I was behind the scenes writing all kinds of letters and stuff, and it consumed my life for the better part of a year and a half. And then at one point I had to just kind of had to back out because it was too much.
Somebody in one of the comments said that lawyers are part of the F problem. I really can't disagree, because I do think they are part of the problem. But luckily enough, you guys are like amazingly lucky that the two lawyers who aren't, are on here right now. So
Well,
I agree with you in part. Kamiha, I think it's
I
Kamiha.
want to say that's true to some extent, but
Yeah,
not true to some extent. I want to say
yeah.
government lawyers are part of the problem. We've and this I blame this on the Bush 2 era. Where attorneys were looking at things that had been looked at before and taking a new twist on things. And I'll go back to the enhanced interrogation memos that all of these attorneys crafted. All that stuff was under legal review. There was some attorney that was looking at that had some, you know, far out in left field take on rules, and they pushed the boundaries. But it wasn't just enhanced
That's
interrogation.
I
It was
mean, but that's how things work, right? People state an opinion, and then they're either believed or not, and then it might be challenged. I guess it was a challenge, right?
Yeah, but
Eventually, it's challenged.
if you're a morally deficient attorney writing a memo on, whether it's enhanced interrogations or whether you found a new twist on the settlement regulations, If you're morally bankrupt, you're going to make the people that are reading your stuff morally bankrupt, and the people that you're arguing one position or another, you're going to argue a morally bankrupt position. And I tend to think that we as attorneys, when we're arguing things, need to still have our moral compass, whether that's right, wrong, or different. I'm not talking about providing a pedophile or a murderer a valid defense. That's what we're obligated to do. I'm talking about attorneys that are reviewing opinions, reviewing statutory pieces, reviewing regulations, and going into it with no moral compass. And writing opinions and providing advice that is wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah, I'll
And it's
deal with
to the benefit of another group, the 1%.
I just answering this question. So I haven't even gotten, I would like hid the lead. I was going to deal with where we are in the case, but I haven't had a chance to talk about it.
Right.
But we will do that. So I just wanted to let you know. I wanted to, so I understand that. I just think that here's the situation. Let's say you're at this is just realistic. Okay. Let's say you're a partner at some big New York law firm. You represent Goldman Sachs. All right. And that account brings into your law firm, because you're their main source of business, that might bring in, let's say, $250 million a year in fees representing Goldman Sachs. So I think it's not a easy decision for someone if Goldman Sachs says do X, Y, and Z, as long as it's not like something like go kill your neighbor, or, something blatantly illegal. But if it's a shady thing, if it shades the line, most likely that, you have a business interest and that's what you're going to kind of protect.
But that's the problem. And is it the attorney that are crafting those memos and crafting those opinions, or is it the leaders in that law firm? Someone is morally bankrupt. Someone is not using their moral compass. I'm sorry. I get it.
You know who
But
it
at
is?
the end of the day, it's like these hedge funds taking advantage of all the settlement rules and taking advantage of, the regulators not paying attention. You're not going to tell me these attorneys don't know. These places are loaded with risk management firms. They're loaded with risk management lawyers. Someone is not doing their job. And let's go back to FINRA. Look at FINRA. We know someone wasn't doing their job in either compliance or the legal department.
Well, we don't
Someone
even know
wasn't
if they
doing
have
their job.
we don't even know if they're adequately staffed, right? We don't know.
True.
It'd be like, so the police, the force in Los Angeles, they have, 10,000, I think it's something like that. Let's say they have 10,000 officers. Maybe they need 50,000. We don't know, like FINRA. Maybe they have like 3,000 employees, but they need like 300,000 employees or much better software, one or the other. But we don't have the ability. I mean, I've never seen it. Have you seen, like, we watched, right, over the past 2 years, in light of MMTLP, we've seen a lot of hearings where all this stuff is discussed publicly. I've never really seen kind of analysis of FINRA's ability to man the project with what they have.
Well, it's comical because they admitted in one of the FAQs that they don't track foreign short position.
Right.
They claim in one of the FAQs that they can't get a comprehensive share count from their own members. I mean, look, I'm patting myself on the back here, but I wrote some of those answers. I'm the guy that said to them, what the fuck do you mean you can't? How can you not? You pick up the telephone, you call the risk management department in Fidelity and say, hey, Mr. Risk Management Officer, I need to know exactly how many shares are in your participant counts of ABC stock right now. Pull it up, get on the phone. If you're telling me Fidelity can't go, yeah, we have 21,537,671 shares in our participant accounts. If they don't have a basic software that can tell them that, there's a real fucking problem. I pull reports all the time on pension benefits for 120,000 participants. I can tell you what John Doe retiree, retired back in 1981. I can tell you exactly what his pension is today and what it was in 1981. So you're not
Yeah.
going to tell me Fidelity can't do that.
I thought the weakest excuse was that my dog ate the blue sheets. I thought that one just didn't
I mean,
cut much.
it's just comical.
It's not really comical. You don't look like you're laughing, so it can't be comical.
Well, it's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for the people at FINRA, to be honest with you. I mean, these are
But
fucking
they're a
morons.
private company, so
I can't get my head around the fact that they actually believe the shit that they put in that FAQ. You know,
but they can get canned, right? It's not up to it's up to the government to get rid of them if they're not doing an adequate job, right?
well, that's the problem. The SEC is looking the other way. The SEC is looking the other way. And just so we're clear, I do believe in the SRO model. I think the SRO model works in certain industries, but not in this one.
SRO being self-regulatory
Organization. I mean, honestly, that's something everybody talks about in law school. You go through that when you're in administrative law. You talk about the administrative law model and the agency model of the SROs. SROs do serve a good function. They're loaded with experts, and depending on the industry, they're a useful tool that the government can use.
I think they're a tool. I agree with you. A tool. But I think it's okay. The SRO model is okay if you removed immunity.
I do to a certain extent. I mean, they need to be they need to be held accountable for their wrongdoings, and right now they're not.
Yeah.
They need to be held accountable for incompetence. They need to be held accountable for looking the other way. Congress should have been all over that FAQ going, what the hell do you mean that you can't get a comprehensive share count for a ticker that's no longer trading? I mean, this is basic stuff. This is not rocket science. Yeah, and the fact that Congress didn't take that and go, holy shit, what the hell are you doing? Robert Cook should have been pulled into Congress. A hearing should have been held, and someone should have said to them, how the hell can you not get a share count of a stock that's no longer trading?
Yeah, I mean, we've been watching it for a couple of years. It's kind of incredible.
It is.
At the pace, right? The pace of what's going on. It's incredibly slow. And obviously the problem we have, and we're going to counter the problem. Now, maybe some people believe that it may be more positive. So, like, for example, if Gary Gensler is no longer the SEC head and he's not the Secretary of Treasury, I guess that's that would be you couldn't have that one either. If he was out of the government and someone else was in, perhaps there would be a change in that. But I'm not necessarily believing that. I don't know, because there's so much, unfortunately, cynical me. There is so much money. There is so much money at the top. And I'm just talking about, if we just pick out like, Citadel for example, but that doesn't have to be them. But there's so much money, and people, just the reality, people are seduced by money. So if somebody comes and wants a favor and they accommodate you in some way, it's hard not to get accommodated. And that's kind of what we fight, unfortunately.
Well, sure. Look at McHenry, and how non-involved in all of this he was. He's the
just for clarity. McHenry is a House congressman.
He's a congressman on the Republican side. He's the chairperson of the Financial Services Committee.
And some people thought he lent a nice ear to the claims of shareholders of MMTLP, but in the end, he didn't seem to push that forward.
Well, it was lip service, and it's lip service because he's gunning for a job on Wall Street when he leaves, or he's gunning for a job on K Street when he leaves. I mean, that's the reality. I had wondered during that time period. I thought it was.
Well, you were talking a lot.
Yeah, I got a lot to say.
I could see that.
I was wondering at that time, and I'd said on a couple of the spaces that we basically had free reign of the halls of Congress, and I thought that was odd. After they exposed James Angel, Congress was an open doors to us. I mean, I did so many Zooms. I walked the halls of Congress and was popping my head into some of these offices. We met with the legal counsel, the chief legal counsel of the Senate Banking Committee on 3 different occasions. We were exchanging emails with these folks, and I thought it was just weird that there was nothing coming in behind us. There was nothing, presenting itself. And after the Berta got whacked, Berta and Palikaris got whacked, then all of a sudden you saw Norman and Sessions change their tune immediately.
They split.
And it was almost like that's what they were waiting for. It was almost like someone knew that was coming at some point, and that was going to be the game changer for them. That was going to be the thing that they could hold their hat on.
Maybe that's how the job is, though. Maybe they just kind of welcome positions and then they'll adopt certain positions, but they don't want to turn any constituent away, right? And they're like, the one thing that the Congress people were really focused on, I think most of all, was if you were in their district. That was more important than the subject matter. The subject matter was secondary.
Yeah, but you know what? There was a lot of meetings where we were on where we didn't have constituents. I mean, there was a tremendous amount of meetings we were on where we didn't have constituents.
Well, I didn't participate in those, so I wouldn't know. I just, again, cynical me, I believe they're more moved if they think you're going to vote for them or can vote for them or not. And I wonder, that's kind of part of my concern. And we talked about this early on. We talked about it multiple times. At some point in time, the House would flip. It would be 2 years. You'd have new crew. Now, that could be good, could be bad, I guess, depending on who comes in. One, it's bad because you have, like, for example, MMTLP. For those of you that don't know about MMTLP, it's a convoluted mess, really. And it takes time, a lot of time and repetition to kind of have an understanding of the facts, even though it's simple, no settlement and U3 halt and whatever. You could talk about that, but there's a lot of stuff that went on.
Right.
And if you're like somebody who doesn't know anything about it and somebody starts talking about it, your eyes glaze over. And it's tough.
The history is convoluted, but I think the end result is pretty easy to explain. They knew that the stock was oversold and they halted it. It's that simple. And I had posted, a couple of days before, and I think it was oh my God, Gandalf. Gandalf had posted something, and I remember that was the first time I'd seen Gandalf.
The real Gandalf, the
real
wizard?
Gandalf. And he posted something. It was a repost of something Tony Twitz had said that MMTLP was a litmus test, and I firmly believe that. At that point in time, the light bulb went off for me. Like, yes, this is a litmus test. If they don't clean this up before it goes private and the spin out happens, no stock is going to be cleaned up. And I still do believe that. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are hard GME, hard AMC, GTII and Finger. But I do not believe that any stock is going to be allowed to run to the point where it causes a systemic risk. We saw that with GME when they took away the buy button. And now we saw it again with MMTLP. And MMTLP was different because they couldn't take away the buy button. They had to shut it down. They had to do what they had to do to make sure this thing didn't explode. And if you don't believe that, or if you're in doubt, go look at Wolf of is it Wolf of Wall Street? Woods of Oz. I forget the gentleman's name. He took a video of the level 2 sales that day, and you can see it. I mean, orders $4,000 a share, $5,000 a share, $1,000 a share, $10,000 a share. They saw that and they shit themselves because they knew it would have been a problem.
Yeah, until there's somebody with power who could tell you no, you got to undo that. Right. It's not going to change, right? It's just going to be business as usual. There literally has to be, and I hate using the term, but there has to be like a security czar. And that person has the power to clean up the markets. So, it may not be fair, but at least it's not a complete ripoff. And again, I always wonder, was it always a ripoff, or is it like the last 5-10 years, since computerized trading got enhanced, is that a change? Is there that much of a change, or is it because there's more access to information, so we see it and it appears like there's more activity? I don't know, but it surely is ridiculous.
I think it started small. I think it started soon after the financial crisis and Dodd-Frank and all those, all we cleaned up the market. And once again, the folks on Wall Street have found a way to fuck the taxpayer. And it started a little bit at a time. Hey, let's short this stock. Well, no one's paying attention. So all right, go out and sell 2 million shares. I know we don't have them. I know we don't have locates. Now all of a sudden, big banks are going, hey, we can charge these guys, 10% of the borrow fee. And yeah, we have locates. Then it gets a little bigger, gets a little bigger, gets a little bigger. Then you have GME blow up. And now all of a sudden people are looking for locates. So what do? You say, oh, well, we've got a crypto coin over here that's backed one to one. Yeah, there's your locate share. We have 150 million shares of X, Y, and Z Corp because we've got a crypto coin that says it's a backed 1-to-1, but it's not. We found that out with FTX. And that's how it snowballed. And now all of a sudden everybody's gone, well, we can't, we open Pandora's box here. If we take one down, we're taking them all down. So my philosophy is as this got bigger and bigger and bigger, and these hedge funds knew they were in the hole, we created the moral hazard with TARP and bailing out the big banks. So now they know, look, we got to go as deep in the hole as we can. So they have no choice but to throw us taxpayer money. So just keep shorting the shit, keep selling what we don't have. Who cares? Because at the end of the day, I'm going to go to Uncle Sam. I'm going to sit down with Ginsler, and I'm going to sit down with what's her name, and I'm going to say, look, if you let us go bankrupt, your pension funds. Oh, by the way, the pension funds that they've been borrowing stocks from, selling it naked into the market. These, that they have a fiduciary obligation to protect these assets. Oh, all those railroad workers in Kansas and Oklahoma, yeah, their pensions fucked. They're going to be fucked, and you're going to take this over anyways. So you might as well give us the money to bail us out. What's going to happen?
Yes, I agree with you. We're going to go back to that point in a second. Just not to bury the lead. There are people out here who are just solely interested in GTII. So just to keep you apprised.
Go ahead. You can go ahead. You got me started.
I know. No, it's
what
great.
happens when you don't give me the topics beforehand.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's entertaining for me. GTII. So still waiting for the judge. Is it like an extraordinary amount of time? Yeah, for us, it's an extraordinary amount of time. I find it annoying I do let our counsel know it seems like it's taking a long time. No response has been given back to me that it's unusual. And this particular judge is very busy, does a lot of trials. So if you're going to do, and this doesn't mean it's going to end up this way, but some people might look at it this way. If a judge was going to deny something out of hand, they could do an order. The order could say deny. That would be the substance of the order. That doesn't take a lot of effort and time. If, however, the judge is going to rule in a different way, and they have to justify their ruling and cite facts, that might take more time. So that may not be the situation here. It may be just the case the judge is too busy and he hasn't had a chance to look at it at all. It's possible. Or it could be that he has a decision in mind, and now he has to craft the order to make sure it fits that decision he has in mind. And if one thing I mentioned since I watched the receivership hearing that happened 2 weeks ago. I think it's about 2 weeks ago, just over 2 weeks ago. And the hearing lasted about an hour. There was a lot of discussion about a lot of stuff. But as I mentioned before, the stuff that got the judge's attention, specific attention, above everything else in that hearing was when they talked about the issuance of the shares in January of 2023 in the approximate amount, either 65, 68 million shares that were issued. I think the date is January 25th, 2023. And Eventually, about 18 months later, in June of 2024, if we all recall, like 36 million shares were canceled of that 65 million or so shares. And during the hearing, that came up. And what the counsel of the other side admitted was that the officers and directors who had to cancel those 36 million shares in June of 2024 because of an erroneous or inadvertent issuance of shares, which the judge also, by the way, commented on and said, "What is that?" When counsel was asked about that, they indicated that those shares were issued in advance. So they basically, and I don't even know why they would give them the shares anyway. That's a separate question. But literally, the board of directors apparently said, okay, I know the deal with, and I'm making things up here, all right? I know the deal with Tesla is going to close in like 6 months, but let's give ourselves a bonus today, 6 months before it closes, of 36 million shares.
Right.
And the deal didn't close, and then eventually they canceled a part of those shares. So the judge at that hearing, after it was disclosed they were paying themselves ahead of time, the judge seemed to be concerned about that and was wondering, is that okay for like the board to prepay themselves for a transaction that didn't close? I mean, I'm saying it like I am, but didn't sound like he was overly convinced. And then when he heard the inadvertent and erroneous part, he was really.
Right.
And that's the very end of the hearing, by the way. That was it. The rest happened. The end, he said, if I was going to read it, what he said, my analysis would be, he thought that was bullshit. You can't do that. And he didn't say that, but that's my read. If I was on the other side, that would be my read also. Doesn't mean he's going to, by the way, necessarily rule to appoint a receiver, but it seemed like the last thing he's going to remember in the hearing is that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's GTII. So he's had it for a couple weeks, hasn't made a ruling. The attorneys for the shareholders don't think it means anything. I've asked multiple times, just to let you know, just because I was curious. Also, then don't they just think he's busy? That's it. And again,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I
Jr.
think
and
that's right.
JR were discussing before, it's expedited, but, it's subject to the calendar of the judge. It depends on how many matters he has, how many trials, how many law clerks, and how much work. It's a lot of work. If you're
Right.
like, he seemed like a very diligent judge. I don't know how he's going to rule, honestly, but he seemed like a very diligent judge. That means he's working hard. Anyway, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think people read too much into how long it takes for judges to rule. I mean, he's probably got one law clerk. That law clerk's probably only out of law school maybe a year or 2 years. There's probably 50, 60 cases in front of this. And yes, it is on an expedited matter, but expedited means, 100 different things to 100 different people. So, yeah, I don't read into, and again, I haven't been following it, but I don't read into anything like that. So,
I find it interesting, again, about the issuance of the shares, because they were issued in January of 2023, referring to GTII. Then the auditor splitting, and it wasn't like the GTII fired their auditor. The auditor just elected not to re-engage, and that
right.
was March, very beginning of March of 2023. So for me, it's interesting timing. I don't even know if it's meaningful, although most times professionals don't move on. This is just my opinion, my view. Most times professionals don't want to give up money. So if they have
Right.
a client, they'd rather retain the client than not retain the client. So to get rid of a client, which disappeared, they did. To me, that strikes me, maybe there was something going on, behind the scenes. So then I think about what was going on at the time. We got the issuance of that, like 65 million shares.
Right.
January 25th, 2023. Would an auditor, if they heard about that and they disagreed with the issuance of those shares, especially if they knew it was for future? I mean, I don't know. Do you know if it was being booked as future for future consideration? I wonder if how they would deal with that.
Yeah, I
So if
have
they
no idea.
knew, so I mean, if they told them, listen, we're going to give ourselves shares today, but for something that's going to close in the future, I wonder what the auditor would do, how they would be able to book that transaction. So I wonder if something like that is a reason, and I don't know, by the way. I wonder if something like that would be a reason why, or if you recall, in April 11th, it became official. They got downlisted to Pink Sheet because of a reoccurring problem with disclosures regarding insider transactions and beneficial ownership. It
Right.
said it said reoccurring, which suggests probably not the first contact. This is my reading of the English language. And again, the timing seems interesting. And then, ironically, the next auditor is Borgers, right? Borgers is the disaster, right? Borgers gets shut down by the SEC. So we know they're terrible. I mean, really, they're terrible, out of business. And we know, I like talking about this because it makes me remember the order because it's part of my brief too.
Right.
What's interesting also is David Reichman, the former CEO. He's no longer the CEO. Luke Rabari is now the CEO and the COO. But the former CEO, if you look at like the financial statement in 2013, when he signs it as the CEO, CFO, and chief auditing officer. And if you recall, he had quite an expertise. He had a high position at American Express, and then
Right.
then he ironically, I don't know if this is relevant. Maybe I'm making too much of it, but ironically, he had a tax practice. So it makes me wonder the timing of those things. Someone with that kind of background, who was an expert in that area, who ended up choosing Borgers, who ended up being a disaster. It's an interesting choice, in my opinion.
Right.
And I don't know someone with that expertise and background who was the chief auditing officer, chief financial officer, and chief executive officer, according to their what they provided in their filing. What kind of duty would they have to kind of pay attention to those choices and to the results? Do you have I mean, I would think like somebody who was like the CFO and the chief accounting officer might be required to pay attention to the auditor.
You know, after working with some of these outside external auditors, I'll give you an example. We, in my previous life, I'd worked, and what I learned pretty quickly with these bigger outside auditing firms is you're constantly, from year to year and from audit to audit, you're constantly dealing with new people. You're not dealing with the same team. Typically, what you're dealing with is, the people that are looking at the data and putting the numbers on the forms are, maybe 2, 3 years out of college. They have a finance degree. Some of them might have a CPA, but they're very green, and one of the things that I found pretty quickly, because they're green, you can talk yourself out of problems. Now, the audits that I was overseeing were not the financial audits in terms of profit and loss of the company, but they were financial audits from an employee benefits perspective that they need to be audited. The finances need to be audited. But one of the things they're required to do within the audit, in addition to looking at the finances, is looking at the participant data. And so what I found pretty quickly was you can talk your way out of errors all the time, and you can explain them away all the time because these people are so green. And so the people at the top right, wrong, or indifferent, know that. They know that some of those things are going on down at the bottom. The better auditing firms, the we did change. We left KPMG because we got sick of the auditing team constantly changing and constantly having to re-educate
All
us.
right, let me focus you. Let me
But
focus you.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. If you have a legitimate firm and people that actually give a shit about what they do, they're going to deal with those problems. Because I was talking to the managing partners at a company called CBiz all the time because they'd call and question things that the team was telling them. So if you're working with a firm that knows what they're doing and cares about what they're doing, those types of errors and issues aren't going to happen.
Yeah. So my question was going to be, you know how many employees that GTII has?
5.
Two. Two. So, you might say that's not like, Meta. Meta has like, 100,000 employees, and maybe there's a disconnect, right? From the accounting department and the CEO. In
Right.
this case, it's pretty direct, right? And, you know what I did? I decided, you know, if I was an expert, like if I was an expert guy and I wanted to hire an auditor,
Right.
and I want and let's say Borgers came to me in 2023, was there anything around that if I spent 5 minutes that would cause me concern? And I looked and I went back, and there is a regulatory or industry association, PCAOB, I think it's what it's called. I think it's in charge of either certifying or regulating or something
Right.
auditors. And I went back, and it started in 2015, just to let you know, the reports of deficiencies, whatever. So there were a series of years of deficiencies. And then I think there were some personnel who had been working for them or affiliated with them, and they got either disciplined or kicked out. There were multiple items. And the problem they had apparently was they had a low level of business. And then I can't imagine why their business exploded. Maybe they were very helpful. I don't know, but their
Right.
business exploded. But they didn't raise their employee level to suit the increase of business. As a result, and I don't know if this was intentional or just happened, seems like they were understaffed. So because they're understaffed, they really couldn't do the audits they needed to do, and they would start making up stuff. That's kind of the situation. Um, I just wonder again, somebody who is an expert who made the decision to hire them where the record was already available, because I found it, and I had no, and I have no idea about the tax practice. And that's why I mentioned tax practice, right?
Right.
Since, because if you were a tax practitioner, just like, if something legal happens, right? A big legal event happens, I'm more likely to take note of that, and it'll click versus somebody who's not. And same thing with somebody about tax. If you're like a tax and your business is accounting, and you're more likely to know about people in the industry and reputations about people in an industry.
Well, sure.
Just
Well,
kind
the
of
other thing too
normal
is
way.
when you bring in a firm like that, when you're a publicly traded company, as the board of directors, you have fiduciary responsibility to be selecting the vendors, so that it's business appropriate. So, like I'll use the example again. When we were in the airline, when I was in the airline industry, even though it was an employee benefits firm, we were looking for a company that had experience working with other airlines because we wanted them to understand our industry. It's no different here. There should have been some due diligence done when you go to select an auditor. And in a global corporation, that's what happens. You set up a committee. That committee goes out into the market and they request RFPs from organizations. My guess is that's not what happened here. My guess is it was, yeah, we got it. We know a guy over at Borders. We'll bring him in here. We'll let him put their spiel on, and we won't. We'll yeah, as long as they're cool and they're going to give us a good rate, we'll take. I mean, that's what when you're two employees in the company, that's how it works. I mean, and let's be realistic. Let's go back. Let's take ourselves back in time. to a movie called Back to School, when Rodney Dangerfield goes into the classroom and the professor's spouting about how you do all the business, and he's sitting there fuming, his head's ready to explode. And he says, well, no, that's not how it happens. You got to grease this guy, you got to talk to this guy, you got to talk to that guy. How are you going to get this without talking to this guy? Rodney Dangerfield is talking about the real world. The professor is talking about it in theory. Real world, when you're a company of two, you don't have time to put an RFP out. You're going, hey, call John Doe over at Borders because I work with him at A, B, and C company. Get them on the phone. Let's get them in here and see what they can do for us. We don't care what the fuck happened to them in the past. They're giving us a good rate. We know John Doe. We're going with John Doe.
Yeah, unfortunately, between like 2021 and 2023, like they reviewed, I think they reviewed like 1,500 audits. No good, unfortunately.
Yeah. What you should do is subpoena the RFPs that went out to those auditing firms, see if they did their due diligence.
Do you know?
We want to see all the RFPs you collected before you made the selection to Borders.
Now, you know what's interesting?
They don't have any.
You know what's interesting is who else use board? It's Borgers, by the way. You know who else used Borgers? NextBridge.
NextBridge,
yeah. So the difference between NextBridge is MMTLP's birth. That's right. Who it gave birth to.
Right.
They use Borgers, I think, just for 1 year though. 1 year's of financials.
Right.
And they got rid of them in February because there was because I looked at the filing. There was something going on. So they got rid of him in February. Whereas, and NextBridge is not like it's 100, 500 employees. It's small also, right? So they got rid of him in February. They got it that particular financial already audited, so they got it taken care of.
Here's what I'm going to say. Here's how I'm going to respond to that, based on what I just said, because NextBridge only has 2 or 3 employees.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to respond to that is I'm going to quote. It was the debate with Dan Quayle, where Dan Quayle was talking about how he knew John F. Kennedy and blah, 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 blah. And he talked about all these great things. And the candidate he was debating looked right at him and said, sir, I knew John F. Kennedy. I did this with John F. Kennedy. I worked with John F. Kennedy. And you, sir, are no John F. Kennedy. Well, David Reichman is no Greg McCabe. I've talked to Greg McCabe. I know Greg McCabe gives a shit. I've heard some of the things that he said. I've seen some of the things that he's tried to do. So there's no comparison.
Well, have you ever called up David Reichman?
No, but I've seen his lack of inaction as a corporate leader. The last 2 years, the board has done nothing. I'm going to say it again. No deals, nothing in the pipeline, nothing I've seen to do anything to generate revenue. The company, for all intents and purposes, is dead. And its stock has reflected that. Whether you believe in naked shorting or not, the stock is reflective of what the board thinks. And the fact that somebody's naked shorting it says this company's going under. We're just going to keep selling and selling and selling and selling. We don't give a shit.
Yes.
Yeah, so again, right, wrong, or indifferent.
It just answered this question. So the auditor, the problem with the auditor, I think, this being realistic, they had to pay a fine. I think it was like $12 million. I'm sure made a boatload of money, but after they're done and with legal and civil lawsuits, they're going to end up in bankruptcy. That's going to be the conclusion. Yeah. They're going to have nothing. So you could add them, but they'd just be an empty chair and you're not going to get anything out of them. It's just acknowledged that they're currently theoretically GTII's re-auditing their financials. That's been represented in court. So if they are doing that, then we will see if the work product provided by Borgers was terrible or if it's accurate. Now, the interesting part, if I mentioned this at some point, when they got rid of them, being GTII got rid of Borgers, the CPA auditor, they put out a couple of PRs, and in the PRs they reserved their rights to go after Borgers for the fees and for any damages that were caused. Again, it's interesting. I think it's interesting when you look at who hired them and who may have supervised the activity. So if it turns out, for example, if it turns out that Borgers did a crappy job, maybe the person who was supposed to supervise their work also maybe should have to pay the the price.
Right.
I don't know, because it depends on, maybe Borges did a great job, by the way. Maybe they're like on the money, and they were crappy for everybody else, but they got this one right. If you remember the difference, like you got 2022 to 2023, that was quite a increase in loss based on their financials. It went from something like I'm not exactly, by the way, but something like $13 million to $87 million. And then a lot of that was stock-based compensation, that whatever, that's but Borgers may have done a great job. They have been accurate, or maybe not. My guess is if they weren't accurate, it's not going to be helpful to the shareholders. My guess, it's not going to be the company is in better financial condition than we thought. My guess is if they, like in for NextBridge, right? When they re-audited the financials, they recharacterized an asset as not an asset, and it affected the financials of the company. And that was the decision of Borgers to classify it as an asset, and then on the re-audit, they elected not to. So we don't know if whoever's auditing now, if they may come up with stuff that might make the financials look worse. Perhaps it's better. I don't know. But anyway, the selection process was just odd, and the timing was odd, and the fact that the person who may have been watching over was an expert, just creates a lot of questions, when that kind of situation is set up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it's going to come out in court at some point in time. But I'm going to take a brief, because you mentioned movies, and I promised it, so I got to do what we promise here. I promised movies and pastrami, so we got to do. I'm going to read off the movies. I said the top 10 best movies of all time. We'll get back to the financial stuff, but I promised this also. And I don't want to get sued for not delivering on that either. So top 20 movies of all time. You tell me which ones you've seen and if you agree, by the way. The Godfather.
No, never
Shawshank,
saw it. Don't agree.
Shawshank, you saw it?
I never saw The Godfather.
Okay. Shawshank Redemption.
Saw it, would not agree with that.
Not agree. I thought it was great. I thought it was
I thought it was a good movie, but I wouldn't put it in the top 20 of all time.
What I like is that the author is Stephen King. I think that's like a great twist, because that's just so not his style. I just thought it was that part. Goodfellas.
Saw it, would agree.
Okay. Citizen Kane.
Never saw it. Don't have no opinion whether it would be.
I saw it. I thought it was terrific myself. That's like in the 20s or whatever. It was old. Orson Welles. Fight Club. I thought that was an interesting choice.
Never saw it. Wouldn't agree.
Saw it. I wouldn't agree. 2001 Space Odyssey.
I saw it and would agree.
Could you explain it to me? Do you have 4 or 5 hours to explain it to me? I saw it. I thought it was interesting. The Stanley Kubrick, very interesting guy.
I thought it was a good movie. It started off going one direction, and then by the end of it, you saw what the true issue was. So
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Never saw it. Wouldn't agree.
I think that was terrific. Silence of the Lambs.
Saw it in the theater and would agree.
That was very good. Schindler's List.
Saw that one and would definitely agree.
Yeah, so I like that one's interesting for me because I saw it, and my father, his name is mentioned in the movie.
Oh.
He was at.
Yeah,
he was at like
a powerful movie. It's one of those movies that you're just, there's movies that move you, and there's good movies, and that's a movie that moves you.
Yeah, well, yes, I agreed. Anyway, I had a personal connection with that one. The Empire Strikes Back.
Saw it in the theater and would absolutely agree.
Yeah, I think that was by far, in my opinion, by far the best Star Wars movie of all of them. And I saw it back in, I think, like 1978 or something. Would that be possible?
You didn't see The Empire Strikes Back in 1978. You would have seen it in 1981 or 82.
Okay. All right. Somewhere in that long time ago. How's that? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Pulp Fiction.
Saw it, and I wouldn't agree with that. It's a good movie, but not one of the top 20 of all
Okay.
time.
Casablanca.
Never saw it, no opinion.
Forrest Gump.
Saw it and would agree.
Back to the Future.
Saw it, and I would not agree with that.
Psycho.
Saw it and would agree.
Vertigo.
Never saw it, no opinion.
I think another one that was terrific also. The Dark Knight.
I saw it and would agree.
12 Angry Men.
Never saw it, no opinion.
Henry Fonda. Really good. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I've seen bits and pieces, but I wouldn't agree with that.
We're almost at the end. The Lord of the Rings.
Didn't see it because I read the book, and I wouldn't agree with it.
Star Wars.
Saw it, and I would agree.
Life is Beautiful.
Never saw it, no opinion.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I saw it, but I wouldn't agree. It's the top 20
Really?
of time.
And
No.
Gone with the Wind.
Saw it and would agree.
Okay, now before we go, that was 20. Before we get to pastrami, I want to go back to GTII. So there'll be a ruling by the court. The court, now we're talking about the receivership. There'll be a ruling by the court. How that ruling, what that ruling is, probably will shape how the company will go forward and how the other side will deal with the case. It also, I think, will impact the defamation case against me, I would think, if a receiver is appointed. I just like thinking, if I was, again, on the other side and I'm claiming being me, I'm claiming, maybe the management's not doing a great job, and then they get delisted after I say that. I think that's a tough position. Just that I don't know, that's just me. All right. Okay. You're not moved. So anyway, from this point in time, we're going to keep everybody apprised of what the decision is, obviously, when the decision comes out, and we'll go over that. And I will keep you apprised. I have a meet and confer tomorrow, which means I have a discussion with the other counsel in my case about my response, and I'll keep you apprised about that.
That's your defamation case?
Yeah, that's my defamation case. I call it actually a defecation case, by the way.
That's about what it is, a piece of shit.
Yeah, that's how I view it, unfortunately. One thing that JR and I are playing with, and we've talked about it for quite some time, is maybe doing either once a month or twice a month. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here. To have like a private, whatever it is, a Patreon membership, whatever, where people could submit questions about their own personal legal topics. We wouldn't give you advice about it, but we would kind of discuss the issues that might arise out of those kind of questions. So it was a much more, for people that were going through or had questions about legal matters, it might be a way of actually getting some better insight as to matters that impact them. And so we're thinking about doing something along those lines. Again, we'd have maybe once or twice a month. We'd take questions from people, and then we would kind of respond to something along those lines. So, if you like that idea, and at some point in time you see or can comment on it, feel free to, because if we end up and nobody wants to hear from us because we've been blabbering all this time anyway, then that's fine also. We don't have to force it. I just thought sometimes because I've heard of those shows before, and people seem to be interested if it relates to their everyday life, if something connects to them. So anyway, just a thought. We've thought about it. It would probably happen sometime this year. If you have a opinion on it, good or bad, happy to hear from you, and we can go from there. So we talked about GTI. We talked about MMTLP. You have no idea, by the way, from this point in time. Do you have any idea what's going to happen? MMTLP?
No, I don't. No.
Yeah.
Someone asked a question if we thought it was going to be resolved before the end of this year.
I thought so, but as time went on, I thought less. Again, I thought also I thought if April passed, Congress would become not useful because of the election.
And you and I, if you recall, you and I had a conversation back in January where we joked that, it was going to be done by the first quarter. And if you recall, we had this whole debate on, well, when is the end of the first quarter? Is it the 31st of March? Is it April 1? And but let's take a blast back in time when all of this kind of went down, and there was all this talk that it was going to be resolved that January. They were working on a resolution, and there were some people out there that claimed to have information that it was being worked on. And you and I had private conversations, and we were both of the mindset that it's going to be a few years before this thing gets resolved.
Yeah, I think people have a difficult time, and including me, by the way, that
Right.
When you get screwed, that you won't get a remedy right away.
Right.
It's
Well,
it's blatant. When something's blatant, you kind of in your mind you think, well, it's blatant. It's obviously improper. So isn't this going to work out right away?
right.
And I think to some degree, people are in shock. They just cannot believe, besides being pissed off, but they just cannot believe that people won't act. It is hard. It is hard to believe.
I made a bet with Gandalf. Gandalf was convinced it was going to be resolved by that July, and I said to him, "No, man, it's not going to be resolved before the end of the year. You're in for the long haul." I had a conversation with another high person that's very deep in the community very early on, and I told that individual that because they were convinced it was going to be resolved soon, and I said, "Look, you're in this for the long haul. This is not going to be resolved quickly." And I don't know what the time frame of any resolution is, and I want to be very clear. I'm out of the picture on any of the congressional conversations, on anything that's really going on. But I'm still convinced that there needs to be a real smoking gun before anything happens,
Yeah, I mean,
because they don't have to do anything. They can hide the numbers, they can hide the positions. So there's going to have to be a real smoking gun. Where that comes from, I don't know. You
well,
know,
we discussed multiple times. I probably did it on a video multiple times, and I think Scott Trout he's alluded to it that if anything like rang out for the need for a whistleblower, this is it,
right.
right?
Yeah.
If you got
And I
somebody, and by the way, listen, if I understand, or I think I understand, that if you are a whistleblower and you're talking about billions and billions of dollars, you would have concern about your safety. And
sure.
I think it's advisable to have concern about your safety. But ultimately, because no one else seems to be willing or able to stick their neck out for various reasons, it kind of just demands a whistleblower. I think there will be. I just don't know. And I don't know if, by the way, if Scott's whistleblower, I don't know if it's his whistleblower. By the way, I shouldn't refer to that way. I just heard it alluded to. I heard it alluded to in connection with his filings, but I don't know if he
Well,
has any contact with him.
as you know, when you make allegations in a complaint, you have to be able to back them up with something. You can't just throw out all kinds of willy nilly shit. And one of the things that caught my eye in Scott's complaint was the 90 million overreach. I don't. And I apologize. I do not know which broker he's with. I think it's Schwab, but don't quote me. The 90 million overage was Schwab. You know, I'm all for it. If Scott's got that information, I'm all for it. But that's how these lawsuits work. You can't throw out accusations without having some level or some understanding of the evidence. I mean, yeah, I know it's oversold, but that doesn't mean I can just throw it in a complaint and sue everybody under the sun. That's Let's take it back to the beginning, that very first question. That's Rule 11. As an attorney or as a person that's making an argument to a court, you can't just throw out willy nilly facts. You have to have some basis in law or fact for your argument.
Now,
So, so
yeah.
I would suspect that he's got a whistleblower, or he might have some type of information that he believes is valid.
Yeah, so Rule 11 is a federal rule, so it's only going to apply to anything that's in federal court. But most states will have, what JR just said. There's a kind of requirement that you have to offer like your complaint in good faith, And if it's, and there's other more specific requirements. But the difference is in federal court, for example, you can't get to discovery until after, long after you've already filed the complaint and you're already
Right.
into motion practice. In California, for example, if I file a complaint in state court, within 30 days, I can initiate discovery. I don't have to have like a discovery conference or
Right.
anything like that. I can get rolling. And the point is, when you're involved in motions, let's say, in federal court, the problem, what happens in all these lawsuits, when the broker, hedge fund, whatever is challenged, it's pretty fast and there's no discovery. And items that you might have been able to use to defend against a motion to dismiss, you don't get access to because you never make it
Oh,
that far.
and it's compounded when you're going up against these broker dealers, because as we all know, they file the complaint and their first response is, you have to go to mandatory arbitration. You're in the wrong venue. You're not in federal court. And as we've seen with your case, the case down in Georgia, as we saw with the other two cases, they're not getting past.
I think Mark has an
Well,
issue.
now I'm not talking about Mark yet. I'm not talking
Okay.
about Scott yet. I'm talking
Okay.
about the first four. So you had your case, and there were three others. None of you got past the motion to mandate arbitration pursuant to the terms of service. So,
I think Rose's might be on appeal, maybe. I don't
Rose,
know.
right. But with that said, that's just the first motion. That's not even really a motion to dismiss.
Yeah.
That's a motion to compel you to do what you agreed to do, which is take your claim to arbitration.
Yeah.
So even if you get past the motion to compel arbitration, you still have the standard run-of-the-mill motion to dismiss based on failure to state a claim, upon which relief can be granted. And so that's the next one that's coming. Even if you do get past the arbitration clause, you still have to deal with yet another potential motion. So, I don't think, and as you and I have discussed often, people don't understand kind of the process and procedure and how all this works.
Yeah, unfortunately, and it does suck that it's so slow. And you listen, if you're if you're in the capital side, you believe if you offer an impediment that it's beneficial to you because people drop out, they can't afford it. All true, by the way.
Right.
And for the, let's say the brokerage, Fidelity, they know what they're going to spend each year on legal expense, just another line item. So they don't care. It's not gonna impact them one way or the other.
Right. These organizations budget for this kind of stuff. They know it's going to happen.
Yeah. So it doesn't really make a difference, but your end, it does.
Well, let's talk about, now that we're on this subject, let's talk about, did you read Mark's response to the motion to compel arbitration? What did you think of it?
I have not read it.
Oh, okay.
Did you?
I did, because I was curious to know what his argument was, because as you and I have talked, that's the biggest hurdle. You've got to get over that mandatory arbitration clause, and how do you do that? And I think he made about as best of argument as he could based on all the facts that are currently.
Was part of it a conflict? FINRA's conflict with
He
being
basically
able to
argued that they can't be a neutral arbitrator when they're the ones that caused the mess to begin with. They're the ones that allowed the overage to happen. They're the ones that pulled the U3 halt button. And oh, by the way, so and so from TD Ameritrade was on the committee that pulled the U3 halt button. So how can these people be a neutral arbitrator? And I thought that was an interesting take, to make the argument that FINRA was basically, there was no way they could do it. I thought he might argue something on Jaworski or Jakowski, which you and I talked about at length, that, to connect the dots, but I don't want to say it was a stretch, but he had so much meat on the bone with them not being, a neutral arbitrator, that there probably wasn't any point in making that. Now he can try and get it in during oral arguments or try and get it into some rebuttal brief if he has that opportunity. But I think they only had like 22 pages, and as you know, that's not a lot. If you throw in the citations and the fact that it's double spaced and 12-point new courier font, it's not a lot of room to make kind of those unique arguments.
I made the same allegation, unfortunately. Different judicial area,
Right.
different court. Obviously, I had the same issue. I claimed that FINRA could not be the one administering it because one, I sued them. That was my argument. I literally sued FINRA. So how could they then manage an arbitration process and not have a conflict? They
Well,
do. They do have a conflict, but so be it.
as you know, I've always thought there was a claim under the Administrative Procedures Act against FINRA. The problem that I always envisioned with that argument was Chevron and Chevron deference that they'd be given because which if you go back to the original U3 halt, they stated their reason for the U3 halt. Well, under Chevron, that's it. The argument's over. You have to defer to the agency. But now that Looper has overturned Chevron, I think there's a stronger argument under the Administrative Procedures Act because now the judge not only is he obligated to review it, now he can interpret his own opinion of what the U3 halt statutory requirement means
Yeah.
and whether or not FINRA acted reasonably. Now, on paper, it sounds like they acted reasonably, but now you throw in all these other facts. You throw in the level 2 data. You throw in some of the recorded conversations that came out after this. Is FINRA's, logic under the U3 halt reasonable now for a judge to go, yeah, I'm going to agree with that? Because they don't have to agree with it anymore. They can put their own interpretation in place.
Yeah, Looper was a Supreme Court decision in the last term, and it basically said that the old rule was you defer to the agency's interpretation of things. And if they said
reasonable.
Yeah, well, I know, but reasonable, you're deferring. So you're reasonable, right. I put in quotation marks. But if they say it's the sky's black, basically it's going to be the sky's black. And now if they say the sky's black and the judge wants to say the sky's blue, then the judge can perfectly say the sky's blue. And they've kind of lost their ability to kind of shape the issues.
Right.
And it's very I guess for constitutional lawyers, that's a very big deal. And obviously for administrative agencies, it impacts their power. And for federal courts, it gives them more power than they had before when it comes to administrative decisions. So since FINRA, et cetera, are in that category, that's of interest to us in the SEC, et cetera. Anything else you want to say? Because we just been babbling on, mostly you. But we've been babbling on for like an hour and a half.
That's why you had me on to talk, man.
No, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's a lot of material. It's a lot of material for people.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot. I think it was a good conversation. We didn't get to talk about pastrami though.
No, we do. We'll leave with the pastrami.
Leave with the pastrami.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to let you tell me. But all I could say is my number one choice. I have a number one choice. I Googled best pastrami in the United States, and the AI response took me to my number one choice. So I feel I'm not out of the loop. Do you have a particular location?
I do, and it's kind of a unique one. So first off, I love pastrami, and I will eat it, just right out of the bag. But I hunted.
By the way, this is not legal advice.
Back in the day when I used to hunt, we'd go up to Center County, Pennsylvania, and hunt on private property. And if you get that far up north in PA, these guys want a deer in July, they shoot a deer in July, they don't care. And the Game Commission kind of looks the other way. So we went up there. This is probably about 5 or 6 years ago. We went up, to hunt, and guy whose property we hunt on, he brought out a bag of venison pastrami that he had cured and took the time to smoke, make it. I'm telling you, I literally had a bag of it like this, and I just was nonstop. I ate the whole bag. It was so good. I'd never had venison pastrami. So I recommend to anyone that if they have the opportunity to get their hands on some, to take the time to eat it because it's fantastic.
Okay. So
That's
my
my
okay.
pastrami.
So I took out a list, and there were a few places like Katz's number. This was up near the top. Katz's Deli in New York. That there were many lists where that was listed. That's not my choice. Manny's Cafeteria in Chicago. Saw that listed in a bunch of places. Not my choice either. Slyman in Cleveland. Not my choice. Kush by Stefan. I don't even know what they're selling there in Miami. Atman's Deli in Baltimore. Shapiro's Deli in Indianapolis. I figure somebody might be in one of these locations, so maybe that's why. Pearlie's in Richmond. Hobbies in Newark, and my choice. So this is my choice. And like I said, when the AI picked it out, and my choice is Langer's in the MacArthur Park area of Los Angeles. And what's best about their pastrami sandwich is their double crusted rye bread.
Yeah.
It is really fantastic. So I highly recommend it. The other place in Los Angeles, if you like pastrami, Langer's number one. Another one that's really good is Brent's in Northridge, and it's kind of another great pastrami. So that's my pastrami list. I thought, by the way, I don't know if it would be well received. I thought about maybe we could do this also, doing a pastrami channel, and what we would do is we'd get deliveries from all these restaurants of a pastrami sandwich, and we eat it on, and we could critique it, and we do, like our own. We'll give an award after 50 weeks to the number one place.
I just lost 60 pounds in the last 6 months. I am not going to sit here and stuff my face with pastrami sandwiches.
Just make it your only meal of the week. That's it. You can make it the only week. Anyway, thank you. We're gonna. I think we'll call it a night we're at $1.50. I think that's great. Thank you for your pastrami story, your venison pastrami story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I try to stay away from cured meats, unfortunately.
So good.
Okay. Thanks everybody who was around tonight. Appreciate it. We will be doing more of these, obviously. We also will keep you apprised of GTII and the results, etc. And we will hopefully talk more about the election. I didn't get a chance to even respond to what you said. That was going to be like 45 minutes I was going to have for that. I didn't even get a chance to say a word. Anyway, look forward to it again. And again, if you have an opinion of whether you'd like to hear us do more specific legal general analysis, in a smaller group setting, let us know if that interests you at all. And hopefully we'll see you next week. And if not sooner, everybody be well, take care, have a great Sunday night. Hopefully, as people said, we'll get an order appointing a receiver. I'm hoping. We're all rooting with you. I'm rooting as much, if not more, than anyone else. So everybody have a great night. Be well. Take care.